Sometimes if you inject the same site over and over again, you get a little lipohypertrophy and you get this lumpy skin. The interstitium, it is the biggest organ in the human body. So the main reason the NAD levels are dropping is because upregulation of enzymes that are degrading NAD. As you're getting into the perimenopausal years, late 40s, certainly should be getting a DEXA scan done and know what your bone density is using Nandrolone with testosterone.
Welcome to our Q&A highlights. Q&A sessions are recorded every month, and our enhanced members get an exclusive opportunity to ask questions from one of cellular medicine's brightest minds, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Get a chance to ask your questions by becoming our enhanced member at bli.academy/memberships. You also get access to our content library full of tips, articles, videos, lectures, previous live Q&A sessions, and more.
All you really smart people may not even have heard of the interstitium as an organ, but that's because we actually didn't even know it was an organ. Honestly, it's only in the past couple of years that we actually started saying, oh, wait, the interstitium isn't just this sort of flat network that we have in the cells. So basically, it is the biggest organ in the human body. And we're now thinking maybe it's one of the things we've neglected in looking at a lot of disease states, particularly cancers and how cancers metastasize. So there's a great study that came out in Journal of Scientific Reports, and it showed that this is a network of dense connective tissue that's filled with these little fluid-filled bubble compartments, right? And the problem was that when we look at the body and we dehydrate the body and we cut it up into pieces and we look at all these different organs, those little bubbles would flatten out. So we didn't see them. We didn't really know they existed until actually people were able to kind of endoscopically look at the live tissue and see that, oh, this is not just a flat connective tissue space in between our cells and around our blood vessels and everything. It's actually these little fluid-filled compartments that are capable of moving minerals and cancer cells, from one place to another. So they have a very unique structure and performing a very specialized task. I very often see women coming into my practice and men who are, over the age of 50 who have never had a DEXA scan done, who really have no idea what their bone density is. And they'll say, oh, I had no history of problems with my family, so I'm fine. Not true. It's a lot of things that can create loss of bone density, not just your genetics. So you really need to have a DEXA scan sometime done. I think, when you look at as you're getting into the perimenopausal years, late 40s, at 50 certainly you certainly should be getting a DEXA scan done and know what your bone density is. When you look at that DEXA scan, you'll look at what's called a T-score. And that T-score will say something like negative 1.2. And if that says negative 1.2, that means you've lost 12% of your bone density. So when you look at those T-scores, we really don't like to see negative numbers, right? And that may be normal for age, but it's not good to be losing bone. Your doctor will not even say that that test is abnormal until you get, frankly, osteoporotic, which is a negative 2.8 bone density. So you've lost 28% of your bone density before your doctor will oftentimes even mention to you. So you've got to understand that number, look at that T-score, and understand what it means and be able to interpret that. If it's negative, I need to address it. And there's a lot of data to support that as we age, we have lower NAD levels, and that, and that low NAD levels are bad. And I will not argue that at all. You want high NAD levels for energy. You want good NAD. The problem is that why the NAD levels are dropping is being overlooked. So the main reason the NAD levels are dropping is because upregulation of enzymes that are degrading NAD and taking NAD, right? So if I give a bunch of more NAD and NMN and NR, can I raise levels? Yes, depending on how much you give and how much these enzymes are taking away. But you really don't have any idea how much to give or how much is being taken away. So what 1-MNA is, it's the main metabolite or one of the main metabolites that comes from nicotinamide, all right? So it's naturally made by our body. We make 1-MNA. And what 1-MNA is designed to do is to really control metabolism and control NAD levels by blocking an enzyme called NNMT, which stands for nicotinamide N-methyltransferase. So NNMT is one of the main enzymes that's degrading your NAD. The NNMT enzyme is highest in the cells you don't want to have NAD. Hormones are helpful. They're critical to bone health, to brain health, to mood, to energy levels, to libido, to hair growth, to skin growth, to joint health. Progesterone receptors are on joints, to cholesterol optimization. If estrogen levels are horrible, it's very hard to have normal cholesterol levels, and triglycerides will be higher. Thyroid won't work well in the face of low estrogen. Somebody's fixing your thyroid, but their estrogen levels are still low. Then you need to have estrogen on board. So basically, and progesterone and testosterone, both immune modulating agents. I don't know that there's an organ system that we can't find a benefit for hormones. I will say there's some, like one of my go-tos for understanding estrogen or just the importance of estrogen is the book Estrogen Matters by Carol Tavris and Avram Blooming. And that's a great book just to understand the defense of hormone replacement therapy and the faulty science behind the Women's Health Initiative study. If you want to learn more about peptides, Dr. Seed's Peptide Handbook is a good source. I love Dane Goodnow's book, Breaking Alzheimer's, to understand lipids a little bit better and the importance of lipids and plasmalogens for our brain. So Breaking Alzheimer's, I think, is a great book. This one, I love this book. Even if you just look at the pictures, there's a lot of dense information in it. And they try to write it in a way that's understandable for most people. So that's a great resource too. For understanding redox, there's a book called Redox Matters. It's written in a little more layman term. Not all of it do I agree with, but again, it gives you an understanding a little bit more about redox, which is also helpful. So those are kind of my go-tos, but I would say it's one of the things we're really trying to do is say that, this data is changing fast. We're trying to stay on top of it and share it with you. And, so I would say stick with us, and again, I keep saying, okay, if I write a book, so much of that information that I knew last year is already outdated. There's new information to replace. So how do we deal with that? I think that's the trickier thing. And he asked about using Nandrolone with testosterone for joint pain. Yeah, and I talked about that a little bit. I actually really like Nandrolone for joint pain, and some great studies on Nandrolone being a compelling medication for joint pain, especially in men, but it appears to work very well in women too. We have a lot of women who do super well with this. I have some patients with bad arthritis that it's hard to get them off of the Nandrolone. You usually want to cycle Nandrolone. You don't want to use it continuously. You want to cycle it. You need to be on testosterone when you're on the Nandrolone. So you use the Nandrolone and testosterone together. But there's some very good studies. And, Nandrolone first came to the U.S. as a drug for treating anemia back in the 1960s, and it was used widely for treating anemia until the advent of erythropoietin. And so it's still used in the medical world for fracture healing, for COPD, but for some HIV patients who can't put on muscle. So it's not commercially available anymore, so you have to get it compounded. But I really do like cycling Nandrolone for joint pain. It can be super helpful. It's a really good study on it for helping tendons too, interestingly, especially rotator cuff tendons. The bigger amount of a peptide, like I have to do a full mil of a peptide, I might want to divide it into half in one spot, half in another spot, or using it more frequently, like twice a day instead of once a day. So smaller volumes is always really helpful. And then you definitely want to use thick areas of skin. It's where my belly doesn't work so well for me. I get really big welts, but if I use my upper hip, I rarely do. That tissue's thicker and denser. And then you've got to massage the skin afterwards. So don't just inject. You're going to sit there and you're going to push and rub on that skin for a minute afterwards after you inject it, right? So smaller volumes, inject sort of straight in, make sure you're deep enough through the skin, not too superficial. You want to be deep enough. So it's not like, you got to be in that sub-Q fat. Sometimes if you inject the same site over and over again, and I have places where I have this, you get a little lipohypertrophy. So the fat cells actually start to sort of scar a little bit, right? And you get this lumpy skin. But you do want to make sure that you're rotating the sites of the peptide and staying at least an inch away from your previous injection sites. If it's truly an immune response and it's not getting worse, but it just gets a little red and itchy afterwards, a lot of people have mast cell overactivity. Sometimes just taking a daily Zyrtec to get that under control can be super helpful. So if you're getting like just kind of red, itchy spots, use a little Zyrtec, because you might be somebody who has a little more histamine reaction to it, and using the Zyrtec can be really very helpful there.